Welcome, welcome everyone. For those all the new folks that have come on board and registered for this year's webinar. My name is Flora. I head up sales for Leopard Solutions. Leading our discussion today is our fearless leader, general manager and owner of and founder of Leopard Solutions, Laura Leopard. We also have two great panelists that are also joining us today, Chris and Jill, and I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves briefly in a few moments. But before we jump into today's discussion on the state of the legal industry 2025, looking back at all the eventful data that came out of 2024 and how that compared with previous years, I'm just going to do a couple of housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded. You can find it, and a copy of this will be sent to all those that registered for this year's webinar. It'll be posted also on our YouTube page, and I'm going to drop a link to that in there. And there's copies of all of the previous webinars and discussions we've had previously that will be found on there. So let me just drop that into the chat. You guys can subscribe to our YouTube page to get copies of all of the previous webinars and videos that we've published. To get access to content, thought leadership, and insights, we are going to be turning today's webinar and the slides and information that we are presenting today into a white paper. It will be available in the next few weeks. You can find a copy of it on our insights page on our website. So be sure to sign up for our newsletter to gain access to that. And there will be, at the end of Laura's presentation, a big announcement about an upcoming webinar that will also be must-see TV. So Laura will give some information on that. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jill to give a quick intro and welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Phil and Laura. It's wonderful to be here. As Phil said, my name is Jill Caughie. I am the Director of Lateral Integration at Cozen, and I am responsible for everything from onboarding through our lateral partners and groups first 18 months to 2 years, or, until they decide they don't need to call me anymore. Happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Jill. Appreciate it. And Chris?
Thank you, Phil. Welcome, everyone. Glad you could join today. I am the managing member of Columbus Street here in New York City, so assisting corporate law firms with M&A and combinations in meaningful ways. And then I'm also the founder of the Lion Group, which is an executive search firm focused on the legal industry, specifically within public and private companies, family offices. That team is in Kansas City. And then I'm fortunate to be a co-host of The Future is Bright. I should also mention my co-host, Howard Rosenberg, over at Barrett's and Brunel. You can find us wherever you watch or listen to podcasts.
And that has become quite the listen. So good stuff, Chris. I did drop Jill and Chris's LinkedIn's into the chat for those that are interested in connecting with them. But with that, Laura, take it away.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, every year we have the opportunity to talk about what we saw, what we experienced, and what we think is coming in the future. So the legal industry in 2024 really underwent some significant transitions. Leadership shifted as a number of managing partners stepped down from their top role. Law firms reacted in divergent ways in 2024. In the first quarter, many firms just held their breath, anticipating a recession that never materialized. Afterward, the top 200 resumed business as usual, focusing on hiring and growth. However, many firms outside this group remained cautious, and their recruiting efforts did not rebound, highlighting a growing divide in strategies within the industry. Corporate counsel teams told us that they were insourcing more and seeking value from outside counsel. Alternative fee agreements are gaining traction as companies are prioritizing cost predictability and value over traditional relationships. Navigating generational shifts, DEI pressures, technological advances, and evolving career aspirations. The legal industry faces all of these, both challenges and opportunities, emphasizing the need for strategic adaptation. DEI suffered setbacks and attacks on all fronts: law schools, law firms, and corporations. DEI chiefs were let go, and departments in some firms were slashed. It appears likely that pressures around this will only increase in 2025. Our article in August of 2023 highlighted the danger of keeping leaders at the helm of a firm for too long and the lack of succession planning. Then in 2024, we saw an unusual number of retirements on the managing partner level. A shift did indeed happen. The oldest cohort of managing partners dropped by 5%. From 8% down to 3%. The largest group of partners, aged approximately 51 to 60, increased by 10%. The 61 to 70-year age group dropped by 7%. We had also reported on a shrinking middle and partnership in 2023. And in 2024, that cohort shrunk again, with now just 33% of partners within that mid-tier level. The youngest cohort grew by 3%, but that was the only area that grew. Our research revealed critical gaps and trends in the legal profession. Nearly half, 45% of respondents to this survey felt unprepared by law school, and 31% found their firm experiences did not meet their expectations. Firm culture also showed room for improvement, with 39% disagreeing on racial diversity and 27% saying social justice and pro bono work were not priorities at their firm. Despite these challenges, satisfaction remained high because 83% would choose their firm all over again, and 67% plan to stay for 3 or more years with partnership and in-house roles as their top aspirations. Mentorship is widely available, 84% said so, but only half of that number found it to be impactful, largely due to random pairings. Finally, Gen Z associates are leading a shift towards work-life balance, with 52% willing to trade salary for a reduced workload and flexibility, underscoring the evolving priorities of the legal workforce. Our findings highlight both progress and persistent challenges in the legal profession. Encouragingly, 70% of attorneys from underrepresented backgrounds believe partnership is attainable, with 63% aspiring to achieve it within 5 years. However, bias remains a significant barrier, as 62% reported experiencing it, most notably among Black lawyers, 67%. Additionally, 32% of attorneys say they have been used for window dressing during client pitches, spotlighting lingering inequities. Career ambitions are evolving, with 35% of attorneys aiming to transition in-house and 52% open to exploring non-traditional roles. Meanwhile, firms are falling short in aligning work allocation with DEI goals, as 73% of firms lack meaningful metrics to measure progress. So a cultural insight also emerged, and the profit motive is seen as the great equalizer, with strong billing performance often overcoming bias. Now, these insights emphasize the need for change to ensure fairness and opportunity across the profession, but with 73% of these firms lacking metrics for measuring work assignments, that's going to prove to be difficult. Now, this survey was conducted in November. It was the inaugural 2024 Lateral Partner Hiring Survey, and it was developed in partnership with Wisnik Career Enterprises. And it gathered insights from nearly 100 legal talent professionals, highlighting the impact of lateral hiring on law firm growth and strategy. So a majority of firms, 69%, are prioritizing lateral hiring, with 64% aligning recruitment efforts with long-term strategic goals, which is great. The primary driver behind these efforts is practice area growth, 39%, with less focus on geographic expansion or client-driven initiatives. However, firms face significant challenges, including diversity gaps, 54%, prolonged hiring timelines, 42%, and inconsistent interview practices, 32%. Now, to address these, 56% of the firms, of the people who responded to the survey, have expanded their lateral hiring teams, showcasing an increased investment in proactive recruitment strategies. However, this stands in stark contrast to some firms that we know of that downsized their lateral hiring teams in 2024. Emerging best practices include leveraging referrals, refining interview processes, and tracking ROI on hires. We're happy to hear that. These approaches aim to optimize recruitment outcomes while navigating an increasingly competitive talent market. The Corporate Counsel survey told us of some transformative shifts in both their legal careers and service delivery. While 80% of respondents to this survey have prior law firm experience, 40% are unwilling to return to one, citing salary and work-life balance as major deterrents. Insourcing is on the rise, with 40% of companies relying on in-house teams for most legal work, reserving ALSPs and law firms just for some specialized matters. Demand for alternative fee agreements, such as flat fees or subscription models, success-based pricing, is growing, driven by the need for greater predictability and value. Value showed up numerous times throughout this survey. And when selecting outside counsel, they really look at responsiveness as being like the number one thing they're looking for. Is my law firm responsive to my needs? They look at expertise and value, and all of those outweigh the importance of long-standing relationships. So don't get too comfortable, law firms. To manage legal costs, companies are increasingly turning to smaller firms, mid-sized firms, and pre-qualified panels, emphasizing efficiency and cost effectiveness in a really competitive market. Now, in response to these challenges, we developed Leopard Prowess. It offers a comprehensive enterprise solution designed to streamline the process of selecting and managing outside counsel. Prowess enables in-house teams to easily find, vet, and create customized law firm panels tailored to their specific needs, and it helps law firms increase their visibility. AI was in the news, with firms struggling to adopt AI policies. The technology moved faster than the firms, however, and many attorneys are using AI on their own. Without a policy in place, firms put themselves at risk. Nearly half, 49% of in-house counsel surveyed by LexisNexis expect law firms to adopt AI within the next 12 months. The legal industry has been slow to adopt artificial intelligence. That hesitation risks stifling growth and losing new client opportunities. As corporate America advances rapidly in AI adoption, law firms are going to have to act quickly to avoid being left behind in this era of technological transformation. There are no blueprints, however, and the technology is moving in areas just inside every conceivable platform. Leopard has introduced AI with our AI Navigator, and our new search engine incorporating AI is going to be available within the next couple of weeks. AI, with its inherent benefits and risks, will soon be inescapable. Now, let's look and see what the data says. Our Leopard Law Firm Index was created in late 2020 in order to give a real-time view on the overall health of a law firm. Now, the index is updated twice a week in order to provide the most up-to-date rankings and information available. And it's not solely focused on financial growth either, but also attorney retention and promotions and other data-based metrics. So this year, we saw that 45% of the Leopard Law Firm Index top 200 firms decreased in point value, 42% dropped in status, and just 9% increased in points, and 4% moved up in status. Now, fewer firms lost points overall in 2024 compared to 2023. However, the increased number of firms dropping a status suggests heightened competition. In every metric, the Leopard Law Firm Index firms tops the AmLaw 200 for growth. Just 42 firms in the LLFI group had negative headcount, while 76 firms in the AmLaw group had negative headcount for 2024. The LLFI firms saw 79% with positive growth compared to 61% of AmLaw firms. And we're talking about headcount growth here. The new top 10 firms in the LLFI index is here. It is based on their average score throughout the entire year of 2024. Kirkland & Ellis took the top spot, achieving a perfect score of 500 for the last year. New to the top 10 this year are Simpson Thacher, Gordon Reese Scully, and Jones Day. So congratulations to all 10. Lateral hiring in the AmLaw top 200 firms is up 9% from last year, despite what you may have read in the news. It is the highest that it's been among the years shown here, outside of those 2-year pandemic sort of overheated stretch. So now this is the AmLaw top 200 grouping, right? But it's interesting to note that the LLFI, that group, hired 13,000 laterals. They hired 12% more than the AmLaw 200 group. Those LLFI firms are generally healthier as a group and on a good growth path. Now, the firms showed here are in a control group that sits outside the top 200 firm, and we have been watching them for all the years that are on the screen. They go from 25 attorneys up to about 1,000 attorneys. I just really wanted a control group of firms that we've been watching for numerous years. And you can see a different hiring pattern over the years. They hit a high in 2023, and it dropped by 1,000 hires in 2024. Now, by contrast, that AmLaw 200 group hit their hiring high in 2021 and then receded in 22 and 23. But they hired about 900 more laterals in 2024. So the hiring patterns between the two groups are different and seem kind of out of step. Litigation, by far, had the most openings in our job database in 2024. Coming in second, but not a close second, was corporate, followed by labor and employment, IP, real estate. So litigation, the big winner last year. Litigation hit a high in job openings in May with 687 opening that month. The highest for corporate jobs was in March at 190. So for the most part, the openings were steady throughout the year. Now let's look at a mid-size firm group. So here, we're just looking at mid-size firms, those ones that are outside that top 200, firms with 26 to about 200 attorneys. And I just went in using our online growth decline report. That's where this data comes from. You can see that 36% of these firms had a negative score in 2024 for headcount. 11% had zero growth. But even the ones that had positive growth numbers experienced hurtful attrition. Here you can see a firm where 57 attorneys left and 57 attorneys were hired. At another, 16 attorneys left and 16 were hired. That is a lot of activity and cost just to stay even in attorney headcount. Attrition hurts. So looking at diversity within the top 200 firms, we saw the surprising good news of gains instead of losses. So while it's true that the gains here were incremental, these gains have always been incremental. So it's still good to see that things progressed despite all the challenges that we talked about earlier. This is going to be a really interesting benchmark to look at next year as we see what unfolds in 2025. So those percentages tell one story, but percentages never tell the full story. So look, we're looking here at the top 200 firms, and you can see radically different numbers, right? We can see that the top number for ethnically diverse attorneys is now at 40%. I've got one firm at 40%, good for them, moving up from 39% from the previous year. But if you look at the previous low number, so that low number was 4%. So that meant just 4% of attorneys at these firms were ethnically diverse. That number moved up to 7% this year. So that's a big gain. And today there are 13 firms that have 30% and over of ethnically diverse attorneys. And now 27 firms have between 25% and 29%. And the most encouraging number is that now only 11 firms in the top 200 have between 9 and 7%. And that's a drop from 20 firms in that category in 2023. So gains really were made, but boy, there's a big divide within that group of hiring of those folks from underrepresented groups. Now, looking at gender diversity within the top 200 firms, we see that the largest percentage moved up to 70%. The lowest percentage also went up a few points to 21% from 19%. And now 58 firms have between 40 and 44% of women at their firms. That's up from 53 in 2023. We also see 28 firms between 45 and 49%, and that's up from 20 in 2023. So if you look at the numbers, the top 50 firms represent about 52% of all the attorneys within the top 200 firm group. So those 50 firms are larger and their trends can be different from the rest. So here we separated them out and we can see that 18% of their exits in that AmLaw 50 group, 18% were in litigation. That's 2 points higher than last year. Oh, sorry, that's corporate. That's 2 points higher than last year at 16%. Looking at litigation, you can see that it dropped a percentage point. So 19% of the exits from that AmLaw 50 group were in litigation. You can also see the exits in the rest of that AmLaw group remained at 27% for litigation. Perhaps they are being recruited into that AmLaw top 50 group. They're definitely going somewhere, but that's a big difference between those two groups. And I think it's important to see the actual numbers too, because you're going to see that outsized influence that AmLaw top 50 firms have over that overall percentage. So if we look at the partner mid-level group, so these are partner exits by JD year for last year. And we're looking at where they went after they exited a top 200 firm. So you see that 24% of partners exited a top 200 firm and returned to one. 10% exited to other law firms and 3.8% to corporations. What that means is that 76% of mid-level partners who exited a top 200 firm did not return to one. They went somewhere, but it wasn't back into an AmLaw top 200 firm. 83% of that next group, age 52 to 60, did not return to a top 200 firm. This can begin to explain that shrinking cohort that we looked at earlier. Now, this data represents laterals who exited and then re-entered a top 200 firm broken down by group. So the surprising stat is that ethnically diverse men re-entered the top 200 firms at a higher rate than white men, white women, and diverse women. White women re-entered at a rate of 28%, diverse women at 27%, and white men at 30%. Now, this is a fascinating chart. So here we're looking at promotions to partner by the number of days it takes to make partner at this firm or at this group of firms. And you can see that in 2012, there really wasn't that much difference between the time it took to make partner between a lateral hire and an entry-level hire, just a little over a year's difference. Now, that gap has increased every year since. Now that gap spans about 4.6 years, and the length of time for a lateral to make partner has increased by 1.8 years. So that's looking at it overall, right? But I also wanted to delve in a little more because we talked about percentages not really telling the whole story. So I went into our benchmarking report. These are 2 items that you get benchmark. How long does it take to make partner at individual firms, either by lateral or entry level? So look at the entry levels. There's one firm, I just ran one report. One firm, it takes 12 plus years to make partner when you enter as an entry level hire on average. At another firm, one of their competitors, 5.7 years. Guess which firm I'd like to join if I want to make partner? That's really good information for them to know. Now, the time to partner for laterals, again, there's a big difference. You have one firm, takes about 8 years when you lateral in on average to make partner at that firm. At another firm, about 2.1 years. Recruiters, this is valuable information that you need when you are looking for associates who are looking to make partner at a different firm. Now, this chart shows in detail how promotions have changed over the years in 2012. Far more people started at the firm right out of law school, right? So look at that. That light blue line is everybody that came in as an entry-level hire. There were far more entry-level hires than were laterals going in. Today, that's completely reversed. Now laterals are promoted to partner far more often than entry-level hires. It just seems to encourage attorneys to lateral out of their starting firm if they want to make partner a bit earlier. So not only does it take longer for them to make partner, there are fewer partnerships being given to those who came in as an entry-level hire. Promotions to partner for those who are likely ethnically diverse has risen from 12% to 19%. For 2 years in a row, entry-level hires topped lateral hires in the top 200 firms. So last year was the first time that it happened in many, many years. It's happened again this year. The margin of difference is a little smaller for 2024, but they were still more entry-level hires than laterals last year. It was a busy year for law firm mergers, and we have a report in our BI suite that measures mergers in the past, as well as predict how well we think pending mergers will succeed when it comes to attrition. So all of these firms are sitting at 100%. So that means they've retained 100% of the attorneys that moved over. It's not really taken into account those attorneys that dropped out before the merger happened, just so you know. But we're going to be watching these firms to see how well they do with attrition in the future. This article in Law 360 used our data to dissect some past mergers and decipher what made a good or bad combination. unlike a lateral departure or lateral group departure, not everyone joining a merger has a choice in the new arrangement. Everyone has to decide leading up to and after the combination if it's right for them. Some merged law firms purposely reduce headcount to maintain or grow profitability, so it's unclear how much attrition is intentional versus regrettable. It is unlikely, however, that any firm would be happy with a success rate in the 50% range. The 70s would be much more of an ideal number. The data shows that retention, about 4 years after a merger really usually doesn't exceed 75%. It often hovers around 50%. However, if the merger's goal was to quickly open new territories and practices, it could still be considered a success, even with larger scale attrition. But firms should know all of that going in and make sure they have the right priorities in line and a strategy to keep people if that's something that's going to be important to that combination. Now let's look at some movement and some offices openings and closings in 2024. So here we are showing states that really have the larger number of openings. So this number includes both traditional and what we call secondary office openings. A secondary office doesn't have permanent attorneys in it. They may primarily work in another office, but this office opened to help cover, a territory with several attorneys who aren't based there permanently. So we can see that California was the busiest sector, 17 new offices in California. Texas saw 10, Colorado 6, Florida 6. I think of all of them, Colorado was the one that sort of raised my interest the most. 4 in Tennessee. So you've got a nice spread here. 4 in New York, not so many in New York City, but in the state of New York. So interesting stats. So here, looking at individual cities, we see the top 200 open 6 offices in Los Angeles, 4 in Wilmington, which was interesting, 4 in Denver. So there were more offices in Colorado, but 4 happened to be in Denver. Houston 4, Boston 3, Nashville 3, and Dallas 3. So looking at some net gains and losses, while California had the most openings, it also had 6 closings, but it still wins with a net gain of 11 offices for the top 200 firms. Texas ended up with a net gain of 8, Pennsylvania 2, Colorado 4, net gain of 4, Florida a net gain of 4 as well. So now we're looking at office openings outside that top 200 group. And here, California, again, 68 new office openings. Florida came in second with 54. Texas had 48. New York had 35. So a sort of a similar trajectory there. So here we're looking at state office openings by firm type. So we've got the top 200 firms, and then we have the firms outside the top 200. And you can see some differing patterns, but there's also a lot of similarities too, right? Lots of interest in California, interest in Florida and Texas. Again, I'm focusing on Colorado here, which I find to be really interesting. New York, of course, a big difference because 74% of the M law firms are already in New York. So it makes sense that there's not that many openings there. It is interesting that, 35 new offices were open there by the other group, though, in New York. Now, Colorado, most of these openings were in Denver. Interest generally is in finance, energy, and the technology sector in Colorado. And it's been noted in the news that billing rates are increasing in Colorado due to this group entering that local market. So right now, there are 66 firms in the top 200 who have an office in Colorado, and 60 of them are located in Denver. So now let's look at individual cities for all that group that's outside the top 200, and DC had the largest margin, 12 new offices, New York 10, Boston 10, so not a lot of surprises there. Wilmington is also something I'm scratching my head about, but lots of Lots going on in Wilmington, Chicago, Houston, LA, and Orlando as well. So now we're going to do that comparison again, looking at different cities. So DC, of course, top 200 already has a big presence in DC. Lots more interest there by the other group. Boston, 3 by the top 200, 10 by the other group. New York, they're coming. New York, this group outside the top 200 are coming. So if we look at San Francisco, lots of activity there. San Diego, big activity there. But it's interesting to see the different scale. But it looks like they're joining areas where the top 200 already has a good presence, and that's going to increase some competition. Just looking at net gains and losses in that outside, top 200 group, California had a net gain of 27 offices, Florida 19, Texas 24, New York 15, and New Jersey 8. Key things to watch in 2025. AI is here. Firms that adopt it are going to have a competitive edge. Drop the mic, end of story. Transparency and value, 2 key drivers in winning business in 2025. I'll say it again, transparency and value. For a shift in the talent race, we think M&A is going to see a possible return with the less regulated environment. That's what everyone's looking for. Success in 2025 is going to hinge on innovation, adaptability, and breaking from traditional models. Firms embracing AI, transparency, and evolving talent preferences will be leaders in an increasingly competitive landscape. And because this is really on topic for a lot of what we talked about. We talked about work-life balance. We talked about transparency. We talked about a lot of this. There's a great webinar coming up. Here's a QR code. You can scan it to register. There is a new product that SurePoint is putting out. It's ZenCase. It has incorporated Leopard data in a true practice management solution, one that's going to redefine what those solutions offer. And I encourage you to join. And that's going to be coming up on Tuesday, February 18th. If your attorneys are complaining about technology at your firm, you should really come see this. So that's it. And that's what we're talking about, right? Changing the status quo and being innovative, being an innovative firm in 2025. So thank you.
Great job, Laura, once again. Great. So I want to turn it over to Jill and Chris to get some of your thoughts and insights. I know we have a lot of data there, but Jill, any immediate reactions from what you saw?
Really interesting stuff. I think absolutely if a firm hasn't already adopted an AI policy, the time is now. And really the focus needs to be on training lawyers on how to use AI within the parameters of professional responsibility. So, certainly I'm sure we'll see a lot more there. Chris, not sure if you want to add anything there before I move on to a couple more points.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, there's 2 thoughts on AI. It's either going to take jobs away or there's some possibility of increasing. I'm on the increasing camp. I think it's going to produce more lawyers. But on the same thing, for firms and productivity and boosting revenue and profits, law firms need to adopt AI so that their lawyers are more productive working on higher bill rate matters and potentially replacing some little less bill rate labor that's involved. So the tool is a boon. It's just a matter of applying it across the platform.
I also thought some of the diversity statistics that the data show were really interesting. And one thing that I think firms should really think about as they consider pitch teams is tying origination credit to those pitch teams. And that would really increase equity, not just with who gets face time in front of a client, but who's sharing in that revenue that comes in.
Yeah, that was one of the big things I took away was the incremental increase on the diversity numbers and the numbers of laterals that entered that were ethnically diverse. I mean, it's all good stuff. I know the industry has really taken some steps to advance diversity, and we've obviously had a lot of news about some changes on the socioeconomic side of things, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes in the future. Chris, any additional thoughts you had?
Yeah, I mean, so my team focuses on in-house recruiting, and diversity is everything. I mean, it was kind of driven by the general counsel. Like, we want to see results in law firms, and it's exciting. The law firms have embraced it. The numbers are showing it, and I don't know. I'm excited to see all the seeds that have been sown in law schools recruiting diversity, because it starts there.
Yeah.
And so I think there's been lots of years of focus on that, and I think we're going to continue seeing those rewards over time.
Absolutely. Jill, I want to ask you specifically about your firm. You guys have shown some steady growth over the years. Mostly, it looks like through lateral hiring. I think you had an acquisition a number of years back of a smaller firm, but talk to us sort of about your strategies, how they align with the firm's goals, and then how do you guys any examples of integration after you bring the folks on board to help drive success?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a member of our firm's strategic expansion group, and we are in frequent communication with management, department chairs, practice group chairs on what the priorities and goals are with respect to targeting laterals with specific practices, client bases, or practices in certain geographic areas. And our partner recruiting team is actively involved. They are engaged in most candidate meetings. They're vetting the LPQs, and they're really crafting the compensation structure. And this involvement ensures that the hire aligns with what our priorities are, and most importantly, with our culture. So in addition to that, these regular scheduled meetings, they center on specific candidates and also the development and integration of our recent laterals. So combining those discussions really ensures a successful transition from recruitment into integration, and also, helps us stay mindful of what the goals were for the specific hire that we're bringing in, and ensuring that they're in fact assimilating to our culture. So we certainly have had many groups come in over the past 6 years that I've been focused on integration. And really, it's about increasing and diversifying their touch points across the firm and building those relationships, making sure that the people who are already here know that these laterals are here, what they do, how they can help their clients. And on the flip side, that the laterals know the full service and scope of service at our firm.
Do you, just really quick, just on a follow-up of that, what other departments sort of are integral in the integration? Do you guys get involved, like marketing and BD and what other groups?
I want to say all of them. I rely wholeheartedly on so many of our administrative departments, everywhere from case management and conflicts, ensuring we have a smooth touch for the clients that are coming, that we're onboarding, because that's their first impression of the firm. And finance, of course, and marketing, we're hugely reliant on. And we have a newer department, our innovation and strategy department, that we're becoming much more intertwined with.
That's awesome. Chris, with your experience that you've seen recently, you talked a little bit about how you were getting involved on a lot of different aspects, in-house partner recruiting, and then also getting involved in some of your mergers and acquisitions. We've seen a lot of that over the last year. I mean, it was a tremendous uptick in it. Some of them large firms that have combined overseas with some UK firms, large firms acquiring smaller boutique firms. What are some of the challenges and considerations that some of the law firm leaders that you talk to think about as they want to get into that moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about law firm executives, law firm leaders, chairmen, women, the executive committee, they're really busy. And many of them are still billing, truthfully, or they're managing thousands person firms or larger, and there's just a lot going on. So a challenge is time. And what I'm trying to help firms understand is avoiding and helping firms avoid conversations that are fruitless. There's a lot of conversations out there that are done over a double scotch and they try to get a deal done. And what tends to happen is it's like oil and water when they really get into it and look at it, besides being two friends coming together or just mutual respect. And so helping firms align culture, values, economics, fit, mutual interests, mutual goals, um, and speeding up the process, trying to avoid these conversations that are time sucks and can create problems like um, a challenge is it being leaked. Maybe wasn't going to go anywhere, but it somehow got out. And now it creates press issues, it creates fear, it creates the wrong message, all these things. And so it's a delicate process that should be done very confidentially with very strategic partners. So the people who are involved, sometimes it's done within a firm where they identify the best firms they talk to. Sometimes they will work with folks like me, where we're trying to make sure that they have the most fruitful conversation each time they talk, and that there's alignment. So there's not a formula compensation firm talking to a subjective compensation firm, for example. Other challenges, obviously, debt is a big one. Other ones could be like the equity structure. You've got some firms who really believe that one share means one count. Other firms, which might be a little more school, might be saying, hey, I own 75% of the shares. And so there's challenges when you're trying to mix that. And then you got, competing goals. Obviously, economics, bill rates, all these things create either fruitful conversations or not so fruitful, and they create lots of challenges.
But one of the main objectives, obviously, is they're looking to either expand their footprint, grow. You talked a great example earlier, if you don't mind sharing some of the feedback on the reasons why they were looking to do this.
Yeah, so the reason why they grow, the reason why they consider a merger or combination. Um, so it's a little bit a conversation around like why a lateral moves to a law firm. There's all kinds of reasons why. Now, what I'll tell you and boil it down is it's about two things. It's about talent and clients, and it's about retaining talent and getting new talent, and it's about retaining clients and getting new clients. And there's reasons why firms may be more motivated to have a conversation. So, if I may pick on Leopard for a second, so they had a successful merger back in 2007, and unfortunately, there were regrettable departures over a long period of years, to where now they're joining a very large firm, Troutman, and it gives them a phenomenal platform, but it's because of departures over a long period of time. And so sometimes that happens very fast and they need to make a change. Sometimes it happens very slow. And so there is, unfortunately, the power of the AmLaw 50, AmLaw 100, where they are poaching regrettable departures from firms. It happened in Atlanta with Reed Smith. That was a huge group they picked up from Morris Manning, I believe. And it affects their bottom line, their top line, the culture, everything. And that's why, in essence, the AmLaw 100 is like eating the world right now.
Right, right. Real quick, on a separate note, there was a question about your audio and mic being amazing, by the way. So someone wants to know what you have, what your equipment is.
Oh, that's so funny. It's a German brand that I use for recording. I can't even tell you the name of it. I'll be embarrassed to try to pronounce it. Phil, can I talk a couple more points on that?
Please.
On reasons why?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great. So sometimes there's a platform, and one of them last year talked about this, which is they hit a ceiling. They hit the limit on their platform. And their clients are saying, hey, we really could use you in these markets. We could use more depth in your practices, deeper benches. And so a regional firm might say, we maybe really need to look at talking to a larger platform or another regional platform where our clients want us to grow to continue their success. Because if they don't, they lose clients and they lose their talent. And so it's a strategic choice. Um, other ones could be succession planning. And we're seeing a lot of that. Laura brought up some really good points where the chairman and managing partners are a little younger now. Firms are approaching me, and I'm talking to firms of typically 50 to 200 attorneys, saying, Chris, I'm anticipating stepping down in 5 years, but I have this mission that I want to double the size of my firm, and we need to strategically grow um, so that another leader can step in and take this firm to the next level. And so very motivating right now. There's partners aging out, there's leadership aging out, and we need to find a solution. Other ones, honestly, scale matters, and it's a very competitive advantage for larger firms. Even firms, if I may say, even firms with lower bill rates, scale matters. You got more attorneys billing so many hours, it puts more dollars that you can commit to meaningful projects, investments, talent, leadership in the C-suite that are not attorneys who can really help drive the firm. Firms of the AmLaw 100 have 4 times the revenue of the second 100. And it's 140 billion based on Laura's numbers. The second 100 is 25 billion in annual revenue. That's astonishing. So helping firms, and that ceiling to get into the AmLaw 200 is a lot lower now. It's like 125, 130 million. So firms have a greater chance of joining the AmLaw 200, but scale and attorney headcount really matter when it comes to competition, competitive advantage, and getting new clients and talent.
It does. Well,
Awesome.
it's all about capacity, right? So the more attorneys you have, the more capacity you have as a law firm to take on new business. But that too is where great technology comes in too.
Yeah.
Your capacity can also increase if you are using great technology that can help them work smarter, not harder. And that should be on everybody's mind. It's not just lateral hiring that can help you increase capacity and get to that next level. It's working much smarter.
And it's so challenging because you got the larger firms who have the dollars to commit to something like that enterprise wide. So they're billing higher rates, they've got more capacity, as you say, and then they're making their already productive attorneys with high expectations to bill even more or be more efficient with their time. It's a very catalytic thing. It's very powerful.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Along those lines, Jill, how has sort of the hiring processes changed for you since you've been at Cozen and what you've seen over the years? I mean, has access to AI data, the process of interviewing, talk through that because the numbers are increasing, so there's more people to hire, right? So you have to fit it all in on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And really, technology, AI, it's such a selling point, not just to clients, but also to laterals. So, we're definitely incorporating it into our hiring and our integration process. One of the most successful ways that I think we started using it is really to help, identify those areas that there might be, mutual relationships that we might not have caught
Right.
otherwise. To really help streamline cross-marketing efforts. So, certainly I think investing in technology and AI, like I said, it should be a major component of a firm's growth strategy. And ours, is led by our Vice President of Strategy and Innovation and our Director of Legal Practice Innovation, and they work hand in hand with a firm technology committee.
Right.
So it's really at the forefront of everything.
And those roles that you just spoke about, I think I've been seeing that almost across the board now with law firms, heads of strategy, heads of innovation, becoming extremely integral parts of the firm to bring the different groups together within a firm. If I'm saying that correctly. Real quick, I know we're coming up on a few minutes. I want to ask 2 more quick questions. One around in-office mandates. We're seeing that more and more. We obviously are hearing a lot of stuff coming out of Washington, D.C. about work from home policies, but there's also been some prominent firms that have, issued some mandates. What are candidates coming to your firm at Cozen asking for, requiring, or expecting? And then Chris, what are your candidates hearing that want to potentially go? So Chris, you want to take the first one?
Sure. So in the in-house world, it is a competitive advantage for clients to offer remote work environments. You're going to get better talent. We advise our clients to say if you need 5 days in the office, your candidate pool is going to shrink. So we help them understand that. It makes the searches challenging, but my team gets it done. So I think there's employers who see an opportunity, but I find candidates that say, hey, I'd rather be in the office 5 days. I can't stand being home all day. So it just depends.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
Joe,
I
what do you
think
hear?
certainly with the more junior lawyers, they want a hybrid and flexible schedule. I think that even the lateral partners we've brought in, they they like that flexibility, but they do recognize the importance of being in an office and being able to have face-to-face conversations as someone new to that firm who's looking to establish relationships and really integrate it. It's essential to have those opportunities for face-to-face interaction. Whether that means you have to go back to 5 days, though, I think that would be difficult to implement for many firms.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Great. Well, good. So just before we get into the last question, just wanted to remind everyone that this was being recorded and the slides and everything will be shared with the registrants. Again, a lot of questions on the chat. I've been feverishly answering as many as possible. There was a question around virtual law firms. I don't know, Chris, you want to take a stab at that one?
What's the question? I didn't see
It says, what are the trends around senior lawyers joining virtual law firms? Any insights on that?
So I've placed a few of those, and it's a very desirable thing. It's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. And I know some senior lawyers who love their firm, loyal, love their partners, and I have seen some of the larger firms create environments that allow them to remain virtual. Um, but the dynamic still changes. So these virtual firms, I'm not going to list them all, but they have very low overhead and they're able to give a lot more to the partner without higher expectations, productivity, and all these other things that firms with brick and mortar usually have. So I think virtual firms are here to stay. I think if you talk to some of them, they will turn their nose up and don't want to be called a virtual firm anymore. So some of that language or vernacular is shifting over time. I think we're going to see more of it. I know of other firms trying to get their model off the ground, and they're coming to me and asking for advice. And I said, the market's saturated right now. It's going to be very hard to get others. I know firms in Europe are trying to come to the United States. I know virtual firms in the United States trying to go to Europe. So there's some of those conversations taking place. If I may be so bold to say, I believe we're going to see consolidation in that space very, very soon. I think the market's saturated, and I think there's going to be some things that are going to take place like what we've seen last year with firm mergers.
That's great. And that sort of leads into our last question. What do we expect for 2025? I think, Laura, you hit it on the head. I think it's going to be a busy year. We did a webinar on that lateral partner survey, and we asked the group of people on the call, on the webinar, what their thoughts were. And overwhelmingly, everyone thought 2025 would be a busy year. Chris, what are your thoughts on 2025 expectations and quick hits?
I mean, just like with the president coming in, I just don't know. I think it's going to be pretty wild. I think there's going to be some interesting announcements with firms. Frankly, I've got my eye on private equity within law firms today. That's a big subject. There's a lot of alternative, unique things taking place, conversations. So I'm excited. I'm optimistic. I think we're going to see a continued trajectory of mergers. I think we'll see more than last year, to be honest. I think it's going to increase.
I agree. Jill?
And with that, with this increased merger opportunity comes many more spin-off opportunities for firms outside of those mergers. So, we saw in 2024, there were, groups leaving the firms that were merging, either because of conflicts of interest or rate pressures or other things they just found not to be desirable for either themselves or their clients. So I think, we'll see a lot more of that in 2025, and there will be some really good opportunities that present themselves.
Awesome. Laura, any last words of wisdom?
Well, just to echo what I've said before, there are two things I'm really going to be watching for. And one is to see if those diversity metrics change. We already know there's been a change at law schools, and we already know the numbers are down at some of the top 10 law schools for people coming from, disadvantaged backgrounds into those schools. So if the top 200 still tap the top 10 as heavily as they do, is that going to change their diversity metrics? That's something I'm going to watch out for. I also keep hoping one day this billable model is going to fall off the pedestal that it currently has. And it's going to be a combination of the young people forcing it to happen and for companies saying we're not paying it anymore. Great thing, or very interesting thing happened where a high profile firm was turned down for work on a bankruptcy case because they knew that the fees were going to be too high and to eat in the money that was going to go, to the investors. That was an interesting move. People are watching for that. So I really would like to see alternative fee agreements rise in 2025.
Yeah, and I'll just end with all the change that's happening down in DC on an almost daily basis. I am sure law firms are going to be busy over the next 12 to 48 months. So buckle up. Well, thank you, Jill. Thank you, Chris, for once again sharing wonderful insights. Laura, great job with the presentation. Lots of great insights and information. So thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.